There. I just had hot sauce. Welcome to That's One Show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim TK. Joined as always by David Rhea.
Hello, Mr. Chokemaster Tim.
No, you totally choked, Tim.
I did.
You had to say
And
it.
Ron Fortier.
Here at last.
Yes, Mr. Ron, but right as we went live, the hot sauce that I had sitting in the back of my throat decided to drop and just caused me to die before I could get my first words out.
Even making Brant have to drink.
Barbacoa from Los Calientes, hot ones. It's a good one. All right. Welcome to That's One Show on Tuesday, where we talk about making comics and stuff. Tonight's topic is recovering from rejection, which is something that is applicable to any creative field. So you may even hear Brent talk a little bit about how that applies to the film field as well, because we share space, visual mediums, and if there's anything that the creative arts love, it's gatekeepers saying no, please revise. Yeah. So this is something that affects writers, artists. Even if you're looking strictly to get into editing, you will have to spend a lot of time cutting your teeth and proving that you have the business sense and creative direction to get to that point. But yeah, no Jose at the moment. I don't know if he said why in our chat, but hopefully he's having a good evening. So I guess just getting into opening field. Do you guys have any rejection letters or denials or getting kicked out of a room memories that you kind of stand out the most to you?
Okay, well, I can remember, trying to break into the business. Long about the time First Comics came on the scene. And I had been writing for small independent companies, particularly Ocean Comics out of Rhode Island, run by Bob Palin. I mean, a one-man operation. And I had done a 4-issue miniseries for Ocean with my pal Gary Cotto, and was kind of using that to see if I could open other doors in bigger companies. So here we go. First Comics comes on the scene, right? And they start debuting all their new titles. They brought back E-Man and tons of really great stuff. Tim Truman's Scout, and the list goes on. So I take a couple issues of this Street Fighter comic that I had done, and I package them all off and mail them to Mike Gold, the publisher and general manager editor of First Comics. A couple weeks go by, and I get a letter back from Mike basically saying, I really like this series. I think this character, what you and Gary did with this urban character. Now, Street Fighter was the idea of an Hispanic English teacher working in some metropolis, and he's getting sick and tired of seeing a lot of his students, his high school students, getting hooked on drugs. And so ultimately, using the martial arts skills he's learned at a local dojo over the years, basically puts on a black suit and goes out and takes on the drug pushers in the neighborhood. And the cops end up calling him Street Fighter. Ironically, this came out just about the same time the Viacom game came out. That's another story all in and of itself. But basically, our Street Fighter was an urban vigilante, all right, with the noble cause of saving the kids in his town and neighborhood from the drug pushers. So here's Mike Gold's letter saying, this is a great concept. You guys did a super job with it. The art's awesome. The scripts are great. The comics came out looking good. And I got to tell you, if Mike Grell hadn't given me Sable 2 weeks ago, I'd have bought this. But I don't need 2 urban vigilantes. That's a rejection that hurts like hell. Let me tell you, okay? I mean, people can tell you what they want. All right, you can train all your life. You can do all the research, do all the hard work. But in the end, it's a matter of timing just as well. And if you miss that open door, it goes by you.
I have a story that's not nearly as encouraging. I entered a film festival screenwriting competition, and I had done pretty well in a previous year with a different script. And I wrote a script that was a comedy script about he was like a CIA guy who has to train guys in his neighborhood to fight a secret Orlando-based terrorist group, which, there's just tons of those running all over Orlando. But anyway, and I sent it off, and I got the notes back, and the notes were, this really isn't very good. And I guess it's kind of funny in places, and by then I'm just like, what? And really they were just like, yeah, sorry, hard pass. And it was times like, I mean, that's probably the harshest rejection I've ever gotten. I've had plenty of, I've sent off a short story or something, and I've gotten back, this isn't what we're looking for necessarily. Best wishes, and they're very studied in trying not to piss you off so that you just go online and just scream at them, and nobody wants that. So that, when you get a rejection letter, typically they are going to be phrased in such a way that, keep trying and, hey, get on you for writing a thing or whatever. But this time, no, they were pretty much like, you think you're funny? Well, we're here to disabuse you of that notion. So that's probably the worst one for me when it comes to mind.
Sure.
I don't have a very funny story or anything like that. I mean, coming up through when I was originally doing things, inking and all that stuff, I sent out a lot. And, I have, letters from Marvel, DC, I think the tops at the same time. Just your standard rejections. The only kind of funny story I had was a rejection that we did ourselves. My friend, who was a penciler, and we did some designs, and it was, we thought they were pretty cool. It was about these enhanced soldiers and all this, and they had they had little screens that they had on their eyes and all this stuff, and we got everything all designed and set up, and I don't remember if it actually went out or not, but immediately, like literally within a week, the Jean-Claude Van Damme Universal Soldier movie came out, which used the exact same thing. So we pretty much rejected it ourselves, and we canceled everything. And probably a good thing with how much that movie bombed. But that's probably the closest that I have. Ourself, denying it. Sure. But yeah, otherwise, it's just we had our standard rejection letters, including Marvel, which eventually went 180 degrees and ended up working for Malibu. That circled around and got bought by Marvel. So ultimately working for Marvel in the end. So there's an irony there.
I mean, nobody likes rejections. All right. I mean, we don't. None of us do. And I've gotten my slew. Like Grant was talking about, short story writing and sending, stuff in like that, and getting, the whole standard letters not what we're looking for, or whatever. Even when they're copycat stuff, they're at least polite. But I can remember one particular editor that, I mean, again, people can just be nasty because, somehow or other they've got some kind of an ego thing going on. But at one point, a friend of mine knew the editor at Disney Comics. And basically, the guy was running around. They were going to be doing a comic book version of their Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. All right. Now, I had just broken into the business. I was doing work at Now Comics. I was writing The Green Hornet and writing Terminator. And this buddy of mine gives me a call and says, hey, he says, the folks at Disney are looking for somebody to write scripts for Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. And I'm like, not my cup of tea. It's not something I want to deal with. He said, well, get you a few extra bucks, get your name out there or whatever. He says, he said, here's the guy's email, right? And he said, why don't you send him a couple plot outlines and because he's really desperate. He's really looking for, writers. All right. So one afternoon, I sit down a few days later and I watch a show on television, right? Thought it's cute. I thought it's fun. It's Indiana Jones as the chipmunks. So I sit down and basically write 2 or 3 short paragraphs on plot ideas for future episodes. And I send them to this guy. Right? Again, a couple of days go by. I get this email back. All right. And he goes, how'd you ever make it as a professional writer? Your grammar sucks. Yeah, really? I mean, that's what you were looking at? You didn't give a shit about the story idea I was giving you, but my grammar sucked? Hey, blow it out yours. I got a hold of my friend and says, do not ever mention this idiot to me again as long as you live. All right? Editors are real people. And trust me, if you get one on a bad day, I don't care what you give them, forget it. Okay? That's it. I mean, it's part and parcel of the creative process, like you said already, Tim, at the start of the show. And you're going to deal with that regardless of what the media is. All right. Mm-hmm. If you're lucky enough to hit a good editor or whatever, who, even if he can't help you, is decent enough to write back a civil letter of saying, hey, this is why we're rejecting this, and you could do this to improve, you can do that, come back to us later with another idea. And I've had a couple of those, and I appreciated them greatly.
Yeah. I'd say the rejection, like, I've gotten rejection letters, and most of them have been, like, the ones that don't sit in my mind and the ones that I have a good, like, a relationship with in my own consciousness are the ones that are that feedback where that they come back and say, like, this isn't what we're looking for, but please try again in this season when we're doing this like collection, or try to include this next time and we'll review it, whatever. Or even if you get a really, like, a good, like, deep in the industry editor who, like, is generally looking to, like, put out good content, you might even get the letter saying, like, hey, this isn't necessarily this publication, but I know this person over here and this is more so their style, so if you want to send it over to them, I'll introduce you through an email chain. The rejection that sits the most in my mind is from a journal. It wasn't a journal, it was an anthology of flash fiction pieces. And exactly. And I had created this story. They're doing this whole thing where, like, it was this fall crossover type of deal where they're trying to combine themes of music and the afterlife and blah 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 blah, and want alternative takes. So I had the story already in my head of, well, what if I took the fable of going down to Georgia to have a fiddle off with the devil to get back your lover's soul, like that thing. But what if we made it a Swedish death metal band? We made things a little more extreme. Kind of made it cool and put a little spin on it. And all I got was like a flat no. It's like, this is surprisingly unprofessional decline. This is kind of like it wasn't even like, this isn't what we're looking for. It's like, we'll not be taking this. It's like, all right, cool, I guess.
Man, a few words. There you go. Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we kind of have already kind of hit what's going to be my first question or my first jumping off point. The two different types of rejections you might get, which is like, ideally you get more than just a "we're not taking this." You actually get like a form letter saying like, "This is not to our taste. Please try again later." Or you get the actual personalized letter from the editor with either feedback or a suggestion. Obviously, it's a little easier to learn and apply from the feedback, but I think you can still, the artist's craft is learning from the rejection. That is the true mark of the artist's craft, is getting kicked into the teeth and coming back and like, okay, how come I get? So how do you apply yourself in learning in either case? How do you sort of take it to heart without getting angry at the editor? Besides, I've given this advice before. You get angry the night. You get angry the night of. You get productive the night after. But how do you not take that to heart? How do you be productive and learn from either a form rejection letter or actual personalized editorial response?
I mean, there comes a point where if you know the editor himself or herself, and it's somebody you've either worked with in the past or whatever, and that can happen, okay? Because I've written, several dozen short stories over the last few years for various anthologies, and there was one editor that I built up a rapport with and sold him a couple stories, and so he came back, knocking on my door and other writers because he had another idea for an anthology. He wanted to do weird westerns. Okay, so I basically, came up with this plot and idea and sent it to him. And again, I think communication is what's really all important, all right, in this process. I.e., when he read my story, he came back to me and said, this isn't a bad story, but it's not as horrible as what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a lot more, the frightening, gruesome kind of weird Western, all right? He says, whereas you have some of those elements, but it's a little more lighthearted and would work probably in another setting, but not for this particular volume. All right, well, I mean, again, he could have elaborated a lot more, i.e., just saying a weird Western, because obviously by reading his letter, I came to the conclusion that he did have a specific bent he was going with for what he was looking for those stories, all right? And it didn't really bother me all that much. I liked the idea. I later wrote it out and then found another weird Western anthology that suited it the whole, perfectly, sent it, got it accepted in the way you went. The other thing was just a case of I didn't have enough information to know what he really wanted. And he ultimately found, enough writers to fill this particular anthology, and hopefully it did well for him. But it's that communication thing about, if you're going to be submitting something, then know your market, know what the editors are looking for specifically. And if you miss the target, then, don't let it be the end of the world. Save that idea and maybe, reuse it somewhere else down the line. Meanwhile, if your editor still, if you have a rapport, which is all important to build, you can probably sit down and say, well, let me come up with another idea. I'll write another story for you that more suits what you are looking for exactly.
I've actually written a few articles on writing. I imagine it's true for all creative endeavors, but really, the fact is, if you're doing anything like that, then you're kind of putting your heart into it already. So, in order to be able to weather rejection and not take it to heart, I mean, in a weird way, you have to take it to heart. If you're not taking it to heart, it's because you probably don't care about the thing you've written, in which case, what's the point of why did you even bother in the first place? But the funny thing about writing in particular is writers are kind of a self-flagellating lot. They they hold their their talent or craft or whatever you want to call it in high regard, but they also are ready to pounce on themselves and to believe everything they ever heard or imagined they heard. And what they hear in this rejection, which is you're no good and your ideas are crap, and you really should just try to do the human race a service by going into a service industry like plumbing. And that is, it's funny how much it creeps up. And so it's almost like as a writer, I have to be my own cheerleader, and to convince myself over and over that yes, I actually am not too bad as a writer. I'm never going to say I'm great, but I think I'm pretty good. And whatever this rejection is there anything I can take from it that will help me be a better writer? And if there is, then consider that almost like a free crash course in getting better at writing, which, hey, that's always a good thing. If it's not constructive criticism, then you can assume either that whoever gave it is having a bad day, like Ron was saying. And if you're sending away a story to like a journal or a contest, you can pretty much assume that whoever read whatever it is you wrote also read at least a dozen other things, maybe even in that hour. Maybe it just got lost in there. And you can be kind to yourself. It's okay. You can be kind to yourself and say, maybe that's what happened. But if they're being mean, or if they're purposely, like the guy who wanted to harp on Ron's editing, or not editing, but punctuation or whatever, I mean, you can pretty much file that under get bent, and I don't need to think about you anymore. That says nothing about my writing, and there are some things that you can do to kind of take care of yourself if you get some bad news. Find someone who actually does like your writing and is not a family member, and just ask him, say, hey, I got a really bad rejection letter, and let him just dote on you a little bit. It's okay. Writers need love too, and you don't have to go through the jungle alone. Get into a writer's group, tell them that you got a bad rejection letter. They will give you some love, and love is sometimes the best antidote to a bad rejection. So
I'm reminded of those old cartoons we used to have in the 50s where you.
hey Ron, for some reason your volume is dipped.
I think it's the audio settings in the browser because there's a feedback coming off Ron's microphone.
Okay.
Yeah. Should be able to hear you better now.
Okay.
Yeah, there you are.
Okay. I remember those old 50s cartoons where the protagonist was in a quandary, and all of a sudden these two little, a devil appear on one shoulder and an angel on the other, right? And I found, personally in my own career, is like every time I finish a story and send it in to somebody, I could hear that devil in my head going, okay, this is when they're going to find out you're a fraud. Okay, this is what's going to happen. It's all going to get revealed. You're a talentless, hack, whatever. And knock on wood, for guys who are out there by themselves doing that, I feel for you and tell you, don't listen to the guy with the horn, listen to the other guy. Just be reasonable, all right? I'm lucky enough to my career launched pretty much about the same time I met my wife and we got married. She became my first reader, and she's the one who drowns out that little horn voice. So it's still there. All right. I mean, I'll send out a letter or whatever, and I'm on pins and needles till I get a return from the editor. All right, telling me I need that. I need that, yeah, this was a good story. Yeah, we like this. We're going to publish it. All right. And I don't think that's ever going to go away. Ever. All right. It's again, and I think Grant would agree, we should be our own worst critics. All right. I mean, I don't ever want to have an inflated ego where I just sit back and go, there's nothing else I need to learn. There's nothing else I need to grow. And so, in a way, rejections ground us. They do. But don't obsess over them. Find, like Brent said, find other people outside of your family. And I know several writers groups that are amazing and really support each other as well. It's a good idea.
I'm trying to remember the name, but there's a website application. If you type in groups near me or activities near me, I'm sure it'll come up in Google. But there's an application that is for finding friend groups or other professional groups in your area. And there's tons of writers group in every, not just major city, but also like in a bunch of smaller communities. There's one, in my suburb. And so you'll be able to find those groups pretty easily. Something I always think about too is that it's a matter of mileage, right? Not just like if you keep on trying, you'll eventually get picked up. I mean, at some point you might by sheer shotgunning the numbers, but it's a matter of the more you apply, the better you get the actual application process or the actual submission process. Because this is where I get to give a little bit of inside baseball and how you can actually learn from a form letter. Being that when I first came onto Silverline, when they got resurrected from the ashes of Malibu, I was as the submissions editor. So a lot of people who wrote to Silverline or writing Silverline now, I actually read their scripts or saw their 5-page illustrations and passed on the decision, yay or nay. And one of the things that is, like Brent was saying, when I get a submissions packet, it would be like 50 stories kind of all sent to me with a note being like, hey, please get answers back to this by Thursday. So I'd have to go through all of that and then meet my own deadline of clearing out the inbox. And so actually, Argo Comics, that's a really good point, and we actually will get to that in a second too, because I think there should be some level of self-rejection in your own project management when you're self-publishing. Anyway, so I would have to go through all this inbox and all the stuff, and I get some good stories that just weren't the right fit, and I'd say like, hey, this isn't the right fit. We're more so this style. If you have a story that meets this tone, please resubmit. Or if it was like an incomplete pitch, I'd say like, hey, I'd like to hear what your third act is. Please resubmit when you have that in your draft document. Other times you get something where it's just the in this world, there's mages that use rubies. Where's the story? What do you want me to do with this? And I'd send the form letter. And so that is something where, not always the case, but oftentimes if you receive a form letter, it's because your submission either did not meet the editorial guidelines listed on the webpage, or your submission wasn't really a submission. It was you pitching a world without the story or the illustration attached to it. The artist equivalent to that would be if you sent 5 headshots or 5 portraits or whatever. Okay, well, where's your sequential art?
Yeah.
And so that is the if you receive a form letter, that's kind of the thought process you kind of have to go to. Be critical of yourself and understanding, like, okay, why did I receive this? You take that first night to yell at the email you got and throw it into your trash box 5 times, and then you call your buddy and you go to the bar or whatever. But then the next day you think, okay, why did I get this rejection? Well, did I meet all the guidelines on the editorial page on their website or on their request for submissions? Or did I actually tell them what a story I wanted to tell, or was I just kind of got excited about an idea and forgot to include the story with it?
Yeah, it's amazing how many people actually think that the submission guidelines, particular or wherever, aren't really guidelines. They're more like suggestions that you can just flaunt because what your idea is so good, you will blow them away. That'll never happen. You will never blow someone away with your great idea if your great idea doesn't conform to their guidelines. And that may not be fair, but you know what? Them's the breaks. It's almost like something I have to remember is these people want to reject stuff. They get so much. They want to get the bad stuff out. They're looking for a reason to say no because they've got to get that slush pile down. And for that reason, you don't want to give them any reason at all to say no. Because if you do, if you give them even one, they'll take it because they want to move on. So don't do it. If they're saying 1,000 words or less, do not give them 12,000 words and think, oh, but my story's so great, the 200 words are going to win them over. No, that's an automatic rejection, and it should be because you weren't listening. So just something to keep in mind.
Make their job easy.
Yes.
Yes.
That's something about the editor is that the editor, if you do get accepted, the editor becomes your teammate, and the editor, they're not your boss, but they have this role because they're the one directly working with the publisher, so they know what the publisher wants. They probably have done the market research or are part of the marketing team, so they know what the market wants. But their main goal is that they want to get your story out there in a way that satisfies you, the publisher, the market. And in order to do all that, they need to know that you're willing to work with them. And if you don't necessarily make all the changes or you don't agree on everything, that you're willing to have a conversation and compromise on certain things. Because even if you're writing or magnum opus, you have to compromise on some things. And sometimes that's a really good call. I think I've told this story before, but with the second issue of Wolf Hunter, out now, Silverline store. There's a moment where Roland pointed out, like, hey, your action happens too late in the story. And I kind of thought about it, like, well, it's a slow burn spy story. Like, if we're being true to like Jean Le Carre's medium, the action happens in 30 seconds at the very end. And I think about it, like, well, no, this is a visual medium, this is a comic. We should have a Tom Cruise moment at the start where we have that Mission Impossible chase scene over the top of the train. And it elevated the story. It added a much more dramatized the pacing in a way that would not have been there before. And so your editor needs to know that you're the type of person that if they make that submission, if they make that call, you're at least going to say, like, okay, I'll entertain it. Because if you're someone who isn't even going to cut 200 words on a submission document,
you're automatically hard to work with, and you don't want that if they don't know you.
Well, I mean, again, we're talking make their job easy. I mean, Tim's right. Make yourself some friends. When I broke into the business, one of the first comic strips I ever had published was part of a showcase thing. Charlton Comics was looking for new creators. They were looking for strips. And their guidelines, published everywhere, was the artwork had to come in, the pages had to be drawn, ink, pencil, and lettered completely. Okay. So they put this out. Now I get a hold of my artist buddy, Gary Cotter. We talk about this. I write a script and I send it to Gary. Gary read those guidelines and followed them explicitly. Right? We did an 11-page strip. He submitted that to Charlton amongst the thousands of other strips they got in. Okay. We get a letter from the assistant editor telling us ours was one of the few that came in camera ready. It was a no-brainer. They grabbed it. Never mind, they grabbed it. We were delighted. A month and a half goes by, and we get a letter out of the blue saying, we really like you guys. You're professionals. Can you give us something else? That's what happens when you make friends with editors.
Absolutely. And it is that also, and we've said that like, they want to say no, and that's true. Again, you get a stack of 50 documents, and you got 2 days to get decisions on each of them. And that's just the missions editor, not even like the publication editor or like the chief editor. That's just that's the low man on the totem pole. But when you are thinking of the goal of a publication, right, it's to put content out. So the editor also wants to say yes. So you should submit with confidence, as long as you confidently meet the guidelines. But it is that idea of like, when the editor likes you, the editor is going to look at your story and hope that it's the one that they can push through and that they can like put a package and get out of market, because that is in essence their job, right? They want to each document they're reading, they want to make sure that they want it to be you. And if you do that, if you meet the guidelines, you have a great story. It may even just be a serviceable story that they know they can work with you to make great, because again, the editor is going to try to be your teammate and get it the best it can be. And you develop that relationship. And what may have been, the same story that would have got a form rejection, but because you met the guidelines for the submission, you're confident. Maybe you included a cover letter or something if they asked for it, or if they have that as an option to something so they can get to know you as the person they're working with. That's probably going to be an editor that is like, the old X House, where like literally like they would just grab all the writers that worked on X-Men or whatever, and wherever they went, they're just like, all right, guys, I'm over at DC now, send me your stuff, or I am over at Image now, send me your stuff.
Yeah.
That would be pretty great.
Yeah.
But I mean, I worked for a small independent comic company out of Portland, Maine, which was made up of like 5 guys, and became friends with one of the guys who was the editor. And lo and behold, a year later, he's in Florida working for Techno Comics, making big bucks, and they need writers. I get a call because we work really well together. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Right now, I have nothing on the table." He said, "How would you like to write Gene Roddenberry's Lost Universe for Techno Comics?" Biggest paying job I ever had in the business, ever. And again, because I made friends with an editor at a small house who didn't move to a big house.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, I do want to hit on our comics comment on chat here. That's the beauty of self-publishing, no rejection letters. And there is some truth to that, and that if it's just an idea of like, content mismatch, whatever, you don't have to worry about, matching the exact tone or the exact premise to the publisher, because, if you pitch a crime drama to DC instead of Vertigo, they're probably going to say, hey, send this to Vertigo, not us. But if you're just doing it to yourself, if you're just doing publishing, that's not an issue. However, I do think there needs to be some level of editorial rejection in your own work or in your own project, even if you are self-publishing. And I feel that's like this kind of the system has arisen on the. I'm gonna create some classifications on my own brain space here that make sense to me, so you guys can come in what makes sense. Because you have, in self-publishing space in comics right now, you have kind of the everybody's and the grifters who just kind of make books that don't actually get made, or that are very low quality, or they paid the artist that's featured on the Kickstarter like $300 to make the first 2 sample pages, and then they found their buddy off Craigslist for $5 to do the rest of it. But you get the actual working creatives who put out these really high quality. The guy who did Danny and Moon, I think, the movie Moon and comic Maddie, I can't remember his name, but you guys who put out these really high quality books through the self-publishing system, and these actual working creatives, and usually they will hire a project editor, or they'll have someone who fills that role, where it's not necessarily the writer or the artist. It might even be the letterer or the colorer, like some person who sees the project kind of closer to the end, who can provide feedback along the entire way. And so while you're not necessarily giving yourself a rejection letter, I do think there needs to be some sort of stopgap, like, hey, maybe change this idea, or hey guys, this is kind of a cool concept, we don't have a story. or something along those lines, or even if just like, you get this pitch, you get an artist who's also into it because you guys share the same brain cell, and then after like the letter or the color review, they're both like, guys, this is dumb. We got to stop. We like go back to the murder board and redo everything. But you need to have some sort of a stopgap, I think, because that serves the same role as the editor, right? Is that it's that helping everyone in the team elevate their product to be the best possible product.
Yeah.
And so I know, Brent, having since you've probably been like one of the more business-sided persons, like with like dealing with film in particular, and especially in independent film, I feel that's also something that happens commonly in independent film. I realize, I think, as well, is that you kind of get someone whose job is to keep the director and everyone else in check along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it is true. Are you asking me a question?
As if you wanted to elaborate, or if you had any experience with that, or if you wanted to kind of further build on that relationship and why that sort of editorial stopgap is important.
Film is kind of a different thing, in part because you write a script and you basically are lucky if your script is bought. It will very likely be rewritten by someone that the director has brought on board. And then basically the writer's job ends. Sometimes writers are barred from the set of a film because they might just get too vocal about, what are you doing to my masterpiece? Blah, 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 blah. So some writers are very savvy. They'll get a producer credit, which allows them to be more involved in the final product. But I mean, basically a director, in fact, it's funny, when you're writing a film script, you have to be aware as you're writing the script not to direct the film in the script. Directors hate that. And you don't want anyone hating your work when it hasn't been sold yet. So in a writing capacity, working with an editor is different from working with a director. Frankly, I'll be brutally honest. I've only worked with a couple of editors who were really good at helping me craft a story. One of them was I sold a short story to an Orlando-based magazine, and they were very encouraging, but also, this part doesn't work here. Can you rework it? Now, at that point, I'm like, I will happily do anything you say. And being able, editors who are probably, they're used to getting berated by people who don't recognize the pressures they deal with. Whenever they meet someone who wants their job to be easier, like Ron said, they're more than happy to be your best friend throughout the crafting of the story, which is really cool. Film is different. A lot of writers don't even meet the director. So, yeah, that is kind of the cool thing about, frankly, being a writer versus being like a screenwriter, is it just kind of a different kind of animal. And it has some fun parts. But there are a lot of screenwriters who make a comfortable living and have never been produced before. Their scripts get optioned. The option runs out. Might get picked up by someone else. It won't get made, but they'll get their money, and they're happy about that. But working with an editor on on an independent comic book, like we're writing for Silverline, it's just really cool to actually know that your story is going to eventually reach an audience. So
definitely. I think, well, it is different in some aspects, but I think there are definitely more similarities than you might be giving it credit for, but because it is a visual medium that has multiple moving parts. But when we think about, if you're working at a bigger comic house, it's very likely you may not even meet the penciler or the inker, especially if it's the current schedule that Marvel and DC on, or like the way that like the entire industry was back in the day, where it's as a writer, it's like, all right, you got 1 week, turn in the script, great. You have 2 weeks, turn in letters. Okay, you got another week, turn in the next script. Okay, you got 2 weeks, turn in letters. And you're meeting that monthly churn out, which Braun has probably the most experience out of any of us with. And so it is that point where you had that kind of really fast turnaround with the editor, but even now, or Ron's kind of mentioned this before, I've talked about it as well, but when you're working independently and doing your own self-publishing, you would have a person in your team that maybe is more so keeping you in check, and that maybe the illustrator who says like, hey, this panel doesn't make sense, I'm going to rework it. Or you have someone says like, okay, what if we did this for the first 2 pages instead, because it's more visually compelling. I have visual mind. So Ron, can you kind of talk about, kind of experience working from the, Green Hornet and Star Trek, and like these like really fast, like, perhaps meeting the monthly schedule, versus now where like you're working on something like, you might work on something like Brother Bone or whatever, and then or on your Western, and then you got notes from your illustrator saying like, hey, I'm going to thinking maybe we should change these things.
Hey, look, I wanted to bring this up, and you're right. There's such a huge difference between those two things. Working with a bigger house and working on a monthly, comic or whatever, I had no say in who the artists were or anybody else. My connection, my guide was my editor, and we developed that rapport. They could trust me to turn in scripts, and from then on, it's out of my hands. All right, when you put together a team for an independent project, as a writer, you find yourself maybe floating a little freely out there, not 100% sure what you're doing right or wrong, getting to know the personalities of the rest of the team. And I got to tell you, I'm working on a project right now where I'm really tickled. I'm going to surprise him with Dave, okay? I put a team together because I'm working with an artist I've never worked with before, a letterer I've never worked with before, and I went and got Dave and I asked him if he would join the team as the colorist, okay? Dave says, yeah, I'm on board. Well, in the last couple of months that the four of us have been working on this, I've had situations where I'm doubting where it's going, what I'm doing, and lo and behold, Dave's the guy who's my backup. He's the guy I go to and say, maybe I shouldn't have taken this on. Maybe this isn't going anywhere. What do you think? And I respect his opinion a great deal. And it's helped ground me in getting this particular project going. Because at times the artist has given me different, compositions of what I had written. He's going off on this tangent. We've got a letterer who's not delivering on time all the time. So it's good to have somebody on your team, as Brent had, made, that point earlier on as well, whose opinion you value. All right. To basically say, oh, no, this is okay, you're fine, or no, maybe we ought to go this way. And Dave does that on this particular project, and I am so grateful for him to do that.
It's for me, it's just the fact that, a lot of these projects, if you're passionate about it, and like, for example, with this project that Ron was doing, I could tell when he first started getting into it that it wasn't just, it's just a project, let's go. It was something that I could feel that he had an energy towards, and he had a lot of, hey, how about this? How about that? How about that? And he put it all down there. So, I've had, like Ron said, should I not have done this? And, one of the things I said to him is, I don't think that if you had not done this, that you wouldn't have got the joy that you had when you threw this out. And a lot of times that's what with a lot of the projects, things take their turns, production, stuff like that. But ultimately on these projects that you're doing, you basically want to say, did you have fun? Was it did it capture what you meant to put into it? And, And as long as you're meeting those things, then I think I think you are good for doing it. It's a stretch, and like I said, nothing. It's very rare to get a project that completely flows 100%. Everything, all the dominoes fall in and everything, because like I said, you get different things. Maybe your editor has a different idea that they wanted, or it goes it goes back and like I remember some of the stuff with Malibu was like it would even go back to like if it was a property, it would go back to the property and they say no, we don't like that, and then you have to go and you have to change it and all that stuff. But as long as you go through and sit there and go, did I like this project? Did it fulfill some of what I got into this project for? And if it did, and you're getting the most out of it, then don't go through and focus on all the bad. Focus on the good things that you've done and all that. And this is not a bad. I've heard a lot of things with bad projects and stuff. I think it's a good team in this case. It's just there's variations, and sometimes it's like I hear Ron and I talk to him about it. I was like, okay, well, I'll be a little more flexible on because somebody has a different view and all this stuff. So with a lot of these projects and all that, it's kind of take whatever positive you can get out of it and say, was this a good project? And if everything was good, then you're good to go. I think it's a successful thing, and that for me, that's kind of a learning thing too. After all this, I sit back and say, was I proud of the work that I did? Regardless of what the end result was, I'm proud of the stuff that I did, and if I say yes, then it's a successful project for me.
Yeah. That's something I've said. It's kind of been passed around in a few other circles. Is that the only bad art, or only bad content is content that you didn't want to make. Which sounds kind of silly, but like you can get subjective or objective notes, be like well, your dialogue is sloppy, and you can kind of like, okay, well, I can learn from that. I can tighten that going to the next one. But you have projects where like it comes out and it generally feels like no one on the team wanted to make it. Either they got forced by editorial, but like, or we already bought this contract, we have to put it out, or it's something that they get started on it, and instead of abandoning the project, perhaps they should have, and coming back to it later, they just force it through, and that's how you get movies like The Room, where the only person who was vibing with that was Tommy Wiseau. Everyone else is very much not into it. That was, objectively a bad movie. Everyone agrees on that. But then you get something like, The Crow, which has its issues. It's not the perfect movie. But everyone on that team was stoked. And you still had that cult following behind it because everyone was stoked with it. And, when I say submit with confidence, that's kind of the same attitude you should have with your own work. Is like you should be stoked to put it out there and send it out. Even if you get rejected, you can always pivot, learn, and do more with it. Because if you're into it and you find an editor who's into it, even if it's not perfect, they're going to want to work with you on it.
And you've got your thing. We see that a lot with like actors and things where they're opting for a certain amount of movies with the production company, and maybe there's a project that didn't go through, or they wanted a project to go through and they optioned a couple other movies. So you can get into situations where you're in a thing where you just have a contract commitment. I'm committed to do this. I'm not feeling it. I'm not vibing it. But you can maybe it doesn't end up with the work that you would do on a passion project. But as long as you turn around and deliver a professional experience on it, even going into it saying, not really what I want to do, but I'm going to go through and I'm going to they're paying me for something, or they've asked me for something. I need to deliver at least a quality project, and then keep those standards up, and then go through and maybe you're saving more. I just want to throw everything to the wind and try all this stuff when it hits your passion project. But just remember to stay professional on your non-passion products, because that will happen. And I've had some things as well, not specifically in the comic space, but in some side graphic design projects that I've done, where I've had a person that just, I don't feel like they would ever be happy with the end result. So I've had a point where it's like, okay, well, I've already given you 7 revisions. You're asking for another revision. It's like, okay, I'll give you one more. Just give me whatever feedback you want now. I will go through and I'll give you, what you have. But that's basically be it, unless, we need to go back and rediscuss, pay rates and stuff like that if you want more supplemental changes. So that's another thing that you get into, is sometimes you get an editor or a person that you cannot get exactly what they want, because sometimes they don't know exactly what they want, or they have a set field that is in their mind, and somebody can't reproduce that. So.
And that's something we may get into again when we get into. We might do another episode on publishing lawyering at some point. Is revision clauses, put them in your contract. So we kind of talked a bit about the getting rejected, the 2 types of rejections you're probably going to get, how you professionally and recover, like craft-wise, and then once you develop that relationship with the editor, where you go from there, because again, the goal is to turn a rejection into an eventual success. Anyway, and to develop a good or working relationship with the editor who initially rejected you. That's the goal, right? Is we all want to be friends and put out great content together, great comics that make people happy. Coming to our ending here, emotionally recovering from rejection is sometimes different than professionally recovering from rejection. So do you guys have any rituals or any things that you do, or that you kind of like fall back on to either clear your mind or recenter when you get that initial rejection letter? Or is something you've done in the past where, I've stated that my ritual is that I will delete the rejection letter immediately, undelete it, maybe delete it again, maybe go for a walk, and then try to get out of my mind as much as possible at night, and then focus on being creative again the next day, because I'm not, I know that Donnie Katz, his thing is that when he gets a rejection letter, he immediately writes a script better than the one he submitted, because he's like, I want to show you. Do you guys have any rituals or things like that you do to emotionally recover from rejection?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I get some, I've gotten some criticism, and I actually had talked with Roland about, at one time, I had some stuff with one of his students. It just seemed like it was something that was just kind of a pretty harsh review and all that stuff, and it hit. I don't know why it hit me so hard. It hit me, and it really, on the emotional side, and really kind of dragged me down. Ultimately, I had to turn around and just say, this is one person, this is their opinion, and basically just eventually just pick back up and work through it and just keep going, because honestly, I hit that and I'm like, okay, I'm setting this down. I've got no motivation. This is just like brutal, and just work through it and go through and try to reestablish your love for whatever the project that you're working on, and maybe at this point try to take some of the things in. Don't take everything in a blast towards you type thing, and see what you can pull out positive. And even if you have to just sit back in the chair and just keep going and do that, eventually you get back into the groove, and that'll kind of go farther away, and you'll move away from that. But it can be, some of the stuff can be pretty, if you're not ready for it, it can be pretty kind of, devastating and, and stunting. I think that's probably the word.
I guess that's the context to what you're saying there. The kind of way that I'm approaching this, the way I'm thinking about it, is like the average viewer of the show is probably going to be your college age, maybe late high school age student who is yet to submit their first script or their first portfolio. And so when they get their first rejection letter, it may be the most emotionally hurt they've ever been in their life.
Yeah. And you can see why. I mean, whenever you're writing something, you're right. Unless you're just phoning it in, you are really putting your heart out for inspection. And anything anyone says negatively is going to feel like someone's taking a knife through the heart that you put in there. So, but I would actually say, and I won't spend a lot of time on it because I know we're out of time, but I agree with David. One of the things you got to do is you just have to go back to work. Because if you don't, your rejection will compound, because not only will you feel bad about the rejection, you'll then feel bad about the fact that the rejection is stopping you.
Yeah.
And you will, I mean, if you let that go on, I mean, it could be months of you just in a huge negative space. So the best way to combat that is to just go back to work. And something I do too, frankly, is I read some of my old stuff. It reminds me that I felt confident about it to get in the game in the first place. And if I'm rejected by somebody, I'm almost like, well, they may know more than me, but I know enough to know that I'm not barking up the wrong tree, and I just need to go back to work. So that's really, I think, the best thing you can do.
Yeah, well, I'm listening to what Tim was saying, and I do pretty much the same thing. Tim, i.e., I get a rejection, and I immediately know I can't give it any more weight than it deserves, and have to get out of my head. So, I mean, basically, I shut the PC down, call one of my friends, and say, "You busy?" "No, I'll meet you at this such and such a coffee shop down, in the middle of town," and just get out of the office. Go have a cup of coffee with a friend of mine, tell them what's happened. That sucked. I feel lousy, blah, blah, blah. Get it out. Spit it out, Have the coffee with a good buddy, get a few laughs. And by the time I get back home, back to the office again, like Dave and Brent have both said, that's it. Clear your mind, and it's time to get back to work. That's what you do.
Yeah. I guess we'll end tonight's show with what I think is the best thing to kind of keep yourself centered, to keep your mind focused, especially if you're a young creator getting into it. Some advice that Hourglass gave to Casa Zen. Hourglass, great TV writer and radio writer as well. As a creator, you got into the game because you have great taste. And when you're starting out, your skill does not match your taste. And so you're constantly beating yourself up, you're getting rejected, and you're working on elevating your skill, but by the time you get to that point, your taste has already exceeded that again. So even if you're receiving constant rejection, even if you're constantly beating yourself up, know that it's because that you have put in the time and effort to become an expert in your taste and your skills following that. And, don't let it hold yourself down. Know that you're constantly growing and evolving and learning. We'll be back next week. I won't be. I think most of the crew will be. I'll be over in Bend again, dealing with hotel Wi-Fi. But the next week's topic is learning from reading comics. So how can you as a creator, read a comic and digest it, understand it, and learn how to better your own craft? Learning what you like about it and how you can emulate that, or learning what you don't like about that and how you can ignore it, toss it out the window. I'll be back the week after to rejoin the crew as we get into October and talking about spooky stuff.
Nice.
Thank you, Argo. All right. Make sure to check out Wednesday Wham, Silver Sunday at their respective times. And
Before we jump, we want to touch real quick on the campaign? I think we've got 6 days left.
we got some promotions going on
For this gentleman right down here for me.
Here,
Cape Town.
Cape Town, written by one such Brent Larson. And you can find it here. We have 6 days left. We are halfway through a little over halfway through our goal. Keep in mind that this is a fully completed comic. You're not, like I said earlier, this is not one of those self-publishers or crowdfunders that is putting together some book that never gets made or that is going to change art styles after the first 2 pages. This is a fully completed book, and you are just pre-ordering in a way that makes it easier for our analytics and our distribution. And we have 2 pages of original art left. The other ones have been picked up. So if you're looking to get some original art with it as well from Rob Davis, who you can see perhaps later with Dracula, and inks by Tommy Flormonti. Brent, anything you want to add before we?
No, we're over halfway. I think that's great. I think that yes, we have a little less than a week to go. So if you're on the fence, I'd say now's the time.
Do it. And if you missed issue 1, of course you can get it added into your order as well. And it's not a Silverline product, but it is a streamer with us. Brother Bones, Origin, #1. Also on Kickstarter. Again, pick up both books. Support indie comics.
Please.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll see you next. Well, I'll see you in 2 weeks. These guys will see you next week.
Yep.
But until then,
boom.
Make
mine
Silverline.
Hi, I'm Dave Dorman. Make mine Silverline.